All right, let's talk about what might just be the single most critical and most dangerous strip of water for the entire global economy. I'm talking about the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to break down exactly why this narrow channel has so much power, and more importantly, what happens when that power gets threatened.
To really get a feel for this, I want you to just think about this for a second. What would actually happen if almost a fifth of the world's entire daily oil supply just disappeared from the market? I mean, gone, overnight.
Okay, let's play this out. Picture this. It's a few years from now, February 28th, 2026. Tensions have boiled over in the region. Suddenly, a message goes out over every marine radio frequency. The Strait of Hormuz is officially closed to all unauthorized ships. This is it. This is the nightmare scenario that energy experts have been warning about for decades.
The impact is instantaneous. It's like a heart attack for global trade. All the big players, Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, you name it, they immediately suspend all transits. If you look at the tracking data, you'd see tanker traffic in the area just plummet by 70%. For all intents and purposes, the artery is clogged. It's shut.
And you know what happens next, right? The markets go into a complete and total panic. Oil, which was maybe sitting in the low 70s, is now projected to blow past $100 a barrel. We're talking a full-blown global energy crisis. Which brings us back to the fundamental question, why? Why does this one little stretch of water have the power to do all of this?
So to really understand the chaos, we need to zoom in and look at the anatomy of this choke point. You know, the basic geography and the mind-boggling amount of energy that flows through it every single day.
The number you need to remember is this: 20%. Every single day, 1/5 of the entire planet's oil consumption sails right through the Strait of Hormuz. Just let that sink in. 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil the world uses, whether it's for your car or for manufacturing, has to pass through this single channel.
And hey, it's not just oil. The strait is just as vital for natural gas. We're talking about roughly 20% of the world's trade in liquefied natural gas, or LNG, making that same trip. Most of it coming from those gigantic gas fields in Qatar.
Now, you might be thinking, what about other famous choke points, like the Strait of Malacca or the Suez Canal? And it's true, Malacca actually sees a little more volume. But here's what makes Hormuz so uniquely dangerous. For the massive energy producers of the Persian Gulf, it is the only way out by sea. There's no plan B, no other route for their tankers to take. And when you look at the physical reality on a map, it's pretty stark. At its narrowest, the strait is just 21 miles wide, squeezed between Oman and Iran. It's the only maritime doorway for giants like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, and Qatar to reach the rest of the world. Sure, there are a couple of pipelines that bypass the strait, but their capacity is tiny, a drop in the ocean compared to what goes by sea. Okay, so if the strait slams shut, who feels the most pain? Well, this is where the story gets really interesting, because the economic shockwaves would be anything but equal. There's one part of the world that is uniquely and you could say dangerously exposed. Just look at this. This chart shows where all that crude oil and condensate, that's a super light form of oil, is actually going, and it is staggering. Nearly 9 out of every 10 barrels that leave the Strait of Hormuz are headed to one continent, Asia. The industrial engines of the entire continent are utterly dependent on this one waterway staying open. And if we break it down by country, it gets even more intense. For huge economies like China and India, about half of all the crude oil they import comes through the strait. For South Korea, it's more than 2/3. But then look at Japan. An incredible 95% of its crude oil comes from the Middle East. That means pretty much all of it has to pass through Hormuz. For these countries, a shutdown isn't just an economic headache, it's a direct threat to their national security.
So the risk is obviously massive, and it's heavily concentrated. But are there any emergency brakes? What kind of safety nets does the world have to stop a total global catastrophe?
Well, the world's main insurance policy is something called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or SPR. Think of it as a giant government-owned emergency stockpile of crude oil. The US and other countries created these after the oil shocks back in the 1970s for this exact kind of situation, a sudden, severe break in the supply chain. It's a powerful tool for sure, but it's not a silver bullet. So how does it actually work? Well, it's basically a 4-step process. First, the president has to officially declare that a severe energy supply interruption is happening. Then they authorize a release from the reserve. After that, the government holds an auction and sells the crude oil to the highest bidding oil companies. And finally, that oil is physically pumped out of these huge underground salt caverns and into the market, giving it an emergency shot of supply.
The second safety net is what's called spare production capacity. This is the ability of just a few big producers, and we're talking overwhelmingly about Saudi Arabia here, to quickly ramp up how much oil they're pumping each day. You can think of it like a giant shock absorber for the market. If supply gets cut off from one place, they can, at least in theory, turn on the taps and pump more to help fill that gap. Okay, so zooming out, how does all this fit into the long game? Because beneath the day-to-day headlines, there are two huge competing forces at play that are totally reshaping the future of global energy.
Now, to get these trends, we need to understand a key idea: oil intensity. It sounds complicated, but it's actually simple. It just measures how much oil an economy needs to burn to produce $1 of GDP. So a lower oil intensity means you're getting way more economic bang for every barrel you use. It's a really powerful way to measure energy efficiency.
And this right here is the central tension of our energy future. On the one hand, global oil intensity keeps falling. We are just getting way more efficient. The amount of oil we need to generate $1,000 of wealth has dropped by more than half since the 1970s. But, and this is a big but, at the very same time, the big producers in the Persian Gulf are pouring billions into increasing their production capacity. They're in a race to secure their slice of a market that efficiency is actively trying to shrink.
So this brings us to one final, really critical question. It's a question that affects everything from geopolitics right down to the price you pay at the pump. As the world gets more and more energy efficient, is the enormous risk from choke points, like the Strait of Hormuz, actually getting smaller? Or, as the world's oil supply gets even more concentrated behind that one single waterway, is the risk just changing shape, morphing into something that could be even more volatile? It's a question that's going to define global energy security for decades to come.